In this video, I'm going to have a quick look at what prospective employers can and cannot ask you in an interview in Australia. Ahoy, I'm Peter from Bryter Training, where we aim to help you and your business grow through a combination of positive disruption and our bespoke training programs. Now, if you haven't already, please remember to throw us a like and a subscribe if you find our videos helpful. It lets us know that we're on the right track and it brings us a lot of joy. Now, there's a lot to consider when preparing for your interview. Your resume, what to wear, how to act, telling your story, having answers to common questions, and preparing questions for the interviewer. However, often people are unaware that there are certain things that an employer simply can't ask you in an interview. So in today's video, I'm going to go through the top 12 most common questions we get asked from an Australian legislation perspective. So feel free to play along at home to see if you know the answers. Of course, let's be real, most employers won't admit to discrimination or bias as a reason for not hiring you. However, if you at least know your rights, it may help you be on the lookout for any potential discrimination that you face. So number one, can they ask your age? Well, the short answer is no. This information should definitely not be asked in an interview. So if you do disclose your age and you're not successful because of this, it may amount to age discrimination if you can prove that age was the reason for not getting the job. However, keep in mind that exceptions will apply where a person's age may mean that they're not able to complete the requirements for the role. For example, if you're under 18, then a bar or hotel owner may refuse to hire you because you can't work with alcohol. There are other ways for an employer to get around this question, however, for example, by saying this job requires an employee to hold a valid RSA or responsible service of alcohol. Is this a problem for you? So of course, you can hold an RSA as a minor, but you can't use it until you're over 18. Now, number two, can they ask you if you have children or are planning to have kids? Again, no they can't. Your prospective employers should not be asking questions about whether or not you have children or your likelihood of having kids. Under the Sex Discrimination Act, you can't be treated less favourably than someone else because of having or planning to have children. It could be considered discrimination on the grounds of family responsibilities. Now, keep in mind that as a prospective employee, you have the same basic rights under the Fair Work Act as someone already employed would. So you can't be treated differently just because you don't work there yet. So if an employer is not hiring a female because they may eventually go on maternity leave, then this would also be a problem. So just keep your ears open though for some tricksy ways that employers may attempt to get this information out of you. They may ask things like, what are your childcare arrangements? Or where do you see yourself in 3 years? So at number 3, we have, can they ask your marital status? And can they ask that? The answer is no. These questions also shouldn't be asked. Your marital or your relationship status should be irrelevant to any job that you take or that you apply for. So it's unlawful to discriminate based on this status and could be seen as sex discrimination, and that also applies to questions around sexual orientation or gender identity. So number 4, can they ask you if you have the right to work in Australia? Now this one is a yes. Employers are allowed to ask whether you're entitled to work in Australia and may require proof of this. So asking this question isn't unlawful. However, that doesn't mean that they can ask you questions about your race or your ethnicity, with a few exceptions, such as if the role required the person to have, for example, cultural connections with Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander heritage, for example. So the next question we get asked is, can a prospective employer ask to see my Facebook page? Now, chances are they've already seen it before you've even sat down for the interview. Most employers, recruiters, and HR managers will attempt to check the internet presence of prospective employees. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, even old platforms or uploads like MySpace, Vine, or YouTube. So they can ask to see it, but there is no requirement to definitely hand over your password. It's always worth checking on the privacy settings though of all of your social media and ensuring that they're at the maximum privacy. If you allow public posts or like to have a lot of random followers, then consider the content that you post, how it can look out of context, and also whether the online reputation you want is more important than having a career. And you may not know that many workplaces have social media policies in place, and they don't just relate to their own pages and sites. So if you bring a business into disrepute with your social media activity, then there is a chance that you could even have your employment terminated. Now the next question is, can the employer ask if you have a medical condition? And the answer to this is no, they can't. However, currently many jobs such as those in the police service or the defence force may require that you undergo a health assessment due to the specific requirements of that role. So a health assessment in circumstances such as that is perfectly lawful, and questions around your health may also be permissible in those situations. However, employers need to keep those questions confined to those that relate to the potential health risks in the industry and your ability to perform the role. Questions outside the scope of the duties or the industries and subsequent discriminatory treatment could amount to disability or impairment discrimination. For example, if I have diabetes, then it would be unlikely that this would really relate to my ability to perform the duties of my role. So if I didn't get the job based on that, then that would be unlawful. So next, can they ask why you left your previous place of employment? And the answer to this one is yes, they can. An employer is entitled to ask questions about your previous employment. In fact, they're likely to get some of these answers anyway when your application gets to the reference checking stage. So questioning why you left your previous place of employment is lawful, as it provides context into why you would or would not be suitable for the role. So have an answer plan. Remember not to put down your previous employers or focus on negatives, and remember that they'll probably check your answers against your references. So another question that we get asked is, can an employer ask if I follow a particular religion? The answer to this one is no. An employer cannot and should not ask whether you follow a religion or a belief, and to do so and be treated differently as a result may amount to discrimination on the grounds of religious belief. Once again, this is an area of your life that does or should not affect your ability to complete the inherent requirements of your role. However, there may be some exceptions for religious organisations, for example. So if in doubt, check with a HR expert or with a lawyer. So can an employer ask if you've ever filed for workers' compensation? And no, they can't. Asking someone whether you've ever filed for workers' comp may be unlawful in a similar vein to asking about medical conditions. So depending on why they're asking, the employer could be seen to be discriminating from a couple of different areas. Discriminating against someone on the basis of them making a previous claim for compensation may be seen as implying that they still have the disability or the illness that they claimed for, and this could be considered a disability discrimination. The question may also show that the employee is more likely to stand up for their workplace rights, or such as to make a complaint, and that can lead to breaches in the Fair Work Act. So employers, if they're asking the question for that reason, that would also be something which would be seen as pretty wrong. Now at number 10, can a potential employer ask if you have a criminal record? Now this one does vary depending on where you live. It's not unlawful under federal law, and it often depends on the state that you're in. So many jobs do require a criminal history check, so before offering the employment, but there are limits on how this information can be used. For example, in Tasmania or Northern Territory, it's discrimination to refuse to employ someone based on a criminal conviction if this conviction does not affect your ability to carry out the inherent requirements of the role. Essentially, the conviction needs to be relevant to the job. So for example, a conviction for theft may be relevant to a job that requires handling of money, but a drink driving offence would unlikely to be relevant to an office worker and their role. So while asking about a criminal record is not unlawful under the federal jurisdiction, the Australian Human Rights Commission can investigate any complaints. Employers just really need to consider why they need to check the criminal record of the employees they're proposing to hire. So at number 11, can they ask if you use drugs or alcohol? And once again, the answer is no. This is a largely irrelevant and generally not a question that should be asked in an interview. Nonetheless, drug or alcohol intake may be relevant to some jobs. For example, if you're on a medication that affects your ability to drive, then this is something that should be disclosed. Similarly, in a job that requires long distance driving or operating heavy machinery, it may be prudent to ask whether the person takes any medication that may affect their ability to perform this. So many employers have drug and alcohol policies in place that do prohibit the use of those substances. Mandatory drug testing can be part of workplace policies, and you may have to be bound to comply with those. And at number 12, can they ask if you're a member of a union? And again, the answer is no. It's unlawful under the Fair Work Act and some states' anti-discrimination legislation to discriminate against someone based on their trade union activity or affiliation. So this applies to employees and those seeking employment and is another question to avoid in interviews. So it would apply to someone who isn't connected to a union, but applies for a job in a highly unionised workplace. So those are 12 common questions that people are unclear of when it comes to their rights within an interview, and I hope it was of some interest or use. Now, this forms part of a much larger suite of programs on job searching, resume preparation, and interview techniques. So for more information on those or any of our other programs, please reach out to us at any time. Our contact details can be found on our website, which can be found in the description below. So thanks again for tuning in, and have a fabulous day.